City of more than 5 million people turned into a war zone as the death toll rises inside of Sudan's capital. Gunfire and rockets erupting in the streets of Khartoum. According to the World Health Organization, since then, more than 450 people have been killed, 4,000 injured. Nations spent the past few days evacuating diplomats out of the country. Sudanese civilians have been trapped inside their homes as food, water, and electricity are becoming scarce. And despite calls for a ceasefire to allow humanitarian efforts, neither of the two groups, who were once allies, have observed them. Now, leaders of the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces have been at odds since it overtook the Sudanese government, and that tension has escalated to the point of violence. The world's top nations have been calling for a diplomatic solution, fearing this conflict could spread to neighboring regions. Jamil Jaffer joins us now. He is the founder and executive director for the National Security Institute and a former associate White House counsel to President George W. Bush. Jamil, thank you so much for being with us today. We always appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Veronica.
So, Jamil, break this down for us and explain why this fighting in Sudan broke out in the first place. And tell us more about these rival factions, because I understand that these two generals were once allies.
That's exactly right. Well, this goes back to the removal from power of President Omar Bashir a few years back. You have General Burhan, who's in control of the army, who was the primary mover and shaker when it came to the removal of President Bashir from office, that coup that took place. At the same time, you have General Hemati, that's his nickname, who was the leader of the Janjaweed forces that were so problematic, effective in a problematic way during the Darfur crisis. They came together and ultimately removed, President Bashir from power. Now what's going on is there have been a number of efforts to get a civilian government going. The military has come in and out of power, removing civilian leaders from power a couple of times. The most recent time, they were on the verge of getting a civilian government. Once again, they had a deal in place. The Rapid Support Forces, controlled by General Hemati, were going to be brought into the government and into the military. And then that deal fell apart, and this is the fight that we're seeing now coming as these two rival factions are fighting over control over the country. Burhan has it. Hemati wants it. That's the challenge we're seeing right now.
And Jamil, there's a lot of international interest as to what happens next. I mean, countries around the world are involved. The UN Security Council chief has called out to its members to see what they can do in order to stop the fighting here. Explain why there is so much interest in Sudan.
Well, for a long time, Sudan's been an area where a lot of these issues in Africa come together. If you remember back in the day, President Bashir hosted Osama bin Laden before he ended up moving to Afghanistan. And Sudan tends to be a place where a lot of these sort of conflicting issues come to play. And then, of course, the Darfur genocide that took place really attracted a lot of attention from Western powers and celebrities and the like. And so people have been focused on Sudan for a long time. There are a lot of Westerners, Europeans, Americans, about 16,000 Americans in the country today working on aid and relief and economic development efforts. And so that's a reason why a lot of these countries are focused in on Sudan. And there's been calls for a peace settlement, a resolution, even a ceasefire. 4 ceasefires in the last 24 to 48 hours alone, all have broken down. And so while there have been times, parts of the area where there have been ceasefires, and people have been able to get out, these Western countries are trying to think of how to get their folks, not just their government folks, but their civilians, out of the country. That's one of the biggest challenges that people are facing today.
Well, it is a challenge. And like you had just mentioned, there are 16,000 Americans that are still in the country right now. The country, or the United States rather, has already said that they're not going to repeat what happened in Afghanistan in terms of mass evacuations. Several European nations are evacuating their diplomats, their embassy workers from Sudan. But then that leaves behind the many civilians who are still there with no way to get out. What is being done to help them right now? Have you heard anything more?
Yeah, Veronica, it's kind of crazy if you think about it. The United States government just a couple of days ago got some helicopters in there. They took about 100 Americans at the embassy out of the country, shuttering the embassy and leaving those 16,000 Americans essentially alone to fend for themselves. Now they are working on getting together a list. Americans, as a general matter, when they go to places like Sudan, are asked to register with the State Department to let them know they're in country. But right now, the State Department has sort of washed its hands and said, well, it's up to you. You got to figure it out. They're now relying on private security forces to escort them out of the country, paying tens of thousands of dollars to get out. but that's not going to scale to all 16,000 people. It's kind of shocking to watch this. You see Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in the UK working very effectively to get their civilians out. You see some deals being cut with General Burhan and his army forces to get other UN civilians out. The U.S., the White House needs to step up and make sure that Americans are protected. They're not doing it right now, and that's a mistake.
It's not just these international aid workers, these diplomats that are escaping the country right now. There are Sudanese civilians that are trying to escape as well. They're trying to flee the violence. They've been entering neighboring countries like Egypt, Chad, Ethiopia. What happens next? Are these countries going to be able to take in all of these refugees?
It's a great question, Veronica. You know, this is one of the biggest challenges of any conflict. We've seen it in Syria. We've seen it even with Greece and Turkey at times. When you have major conflict and you see these refugee flows, it can have the effect of destabilizing the countries around them, both economically and politically. And that can be a real challenge for surrounding countries. They have no choice but to take these refugees in, but that can be a real problem for those governments in a lot of ways. And so that's one of the things we'll see happening now in the area around Sudan. Very important to keep an eye on that. That can be a place where terrorism and other issues foment in these refugee camps.
So 100 Americans have been evacuated from the region so far, but one American has died. For those who aren't able to flee, what does this mean? I mean, what could this spell for them? And what happens if citizens from other countries are killed or injured in this conflict?
Well, obviously, it's a very scary and frightening situation for not just the people that are there, but their families back home here in the United States and in other countries. At the end of the day, the best advice that we're hearing right now is for people to hunker down, stay in their living quarters and the like, stay away from windows and the like, because there's active gunfire going on in many of these cities. It's not exclusively just in the capital, Khartoum, but it's spread to many other cities as well. But that's cold comfort because a lot of these people are now starting to run out of food and supplies. They didn't plan on having to be hunkered down in their living accommodations for extended periods of time. So the question is, how do you venture out, get yourself the food and water you need to sustain your family? Can you get it? And then what happens next? And so really the governments have got to step up, these allied governments, the U.S. in particular, the State Department. The idea that Secretary of State Tony Blinken is just saying, well, you know, those 16,000 Americans have got to figure out themselves, that's outrageous and needs to be addressed immediately. And the White House needs to take a very close look and figure out what to do about the Americans that are stranded right now because we've shut our embassy in that country.
Yeah, Jamil Jaffer from the National Security Institute. Jamil, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and for stopping by. As always, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Veronica.